She stood in the hallway, staring at the conference room door that had just closed in her face. Marcus Chen had dismissed her in under 3 minutes. 3 minutes for a pitch she'd spent 18 months perfecting. 3 minutes before he'd cut her off mid-sentence, saying his fund wasn't interested in experimental ventures. But what happened 6 months later would make Marcus question everything he thought he knew about identifying talent. When he walked into the National Tech Summit in San Francisco and saw his own company's logo displayed prominently under her name as a featured keynote speaker, his face went pale. The woman he'd rejected without a second thought had just been named one of Forbes' top 30 under 30, and she was now partnered with his biggest competitor. This is the story of how one investor's snap judgment cost him millions and taught the entire industry an unforgettable lesson. Before we dive into what happened in that conference room and the explosive confrontation that followed, let me know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments. Are you in New York, London, Los Angeles, or somewhere else entirely? I want to know where my audience is tuning in from today. Now, let's get into this remarkable story. Her name was Jordan Mitchell, and she'd been trying to get a meeting with Marcus Chen for 7 months. Marcus was a partner at Apex Ventures, one of Silicon Valley's most prestigious venture capital firms. They'd backed 17 successful startups in the past decade, and Marcus personally had a reputation for spotting unicorns before anyone else. He was the investor who'd identified a small payment processing company that eventually sold for $800 million. He was the one who'd bet on a logistics platform when everyone else thought the market was oversaturated. Marcus prided himself on his instincts. Jordan had developed an AI-powered platform that revolutionized supply chain management for small and medium-sized businesses. The technology used machine learning to predict inventory needs, optimize shipping routes, and reduce waste by up to 40%. She'd bootstrapped the company for 2 years, working out of her apartment in Oakland, coding until 3 in the morning, and surviving on ramen and determination. Her beta clients were seeing remarkable results. One small manufacturing company had cut their logistics costs by 37% in just 4 months. Another had reduced their carbon footprint by half while actually increasing delivery speed. The technology worked. Jordan had the data, the testimonials, and the projections. What she needed was capital to scale. She'd tried reaching out to Marcus through email, through LinkedIn, through mutual connections. Every attempt hit a wall. His assistant would send polite rejection emails saying Mr. Chen's calendar was fully booked. When Jordan finally managed to secure a meeting through a connection at a tech conference, she'd felt like she'd won the lottery. This was her shot. She arrived at Apex Ventures' offices in Palo Alto 30 minutes early. The building was all glass and steel, the kind of place that screamed success and innovation. Jordan wore her best blazer, carried a tablet loaded with her presentation, and had printed backup materials just in case. She'd practiced her pitch 40 times. She knew every number, every projection, every potential objection, and her response to it. Marcus kept her waiting for 25 minutes. When his assistant finally called her in, he was on his phone, barely glancing up as Jordan entered. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. There were framed covers of Forbes and Fortune on the walls, featuring companies Apex had funded. Marcus was in his early 40s, wearing an expensive casual uniform of Silicon Valley, jeans and a button-down shirt that probably cost more than Jordan's entire outfit. He ended his call and gestured for her to sit. Jordan launched into her pitch. She pulled up her slides, started walking through the market opportunity. The supply chain management industry was worth over $15 billion and growing. Small and medium businesses were underserved by existing solutions that were either too expensive or too complex. Her platform democratized technology that had previously only been available to Fortune 500 companies. Marcus was scrolling through his phone. Jordan could see it in her peripheral vision. She pushed forward, talking about her beta clients, about the results they'd seen, about the unit economics that made her business model incredibly scalable. She showed him the numbers: 63% gross margins, Customer acquisition cost of $1,200 with a lifetime value of $18,000, month-over-month growth of 22% with zero paid marketing. That's when Marcus interrupted her. He didn't even look at her slides. He just said the company wasn't the right fit for Apex's portfolio. Jordan tried to address what she thought might be his concerns. She mentioned her technical background, her degree in computer science from Stanford, her 5 years of experience at a major tech company before starting her own venture. Marcus waved his hand dismissively. He said something about the market being crowded, about supply chain logistics being a difficult space, about Apex focusing on other sectors right now. Jordan pressed on. She mentioned the 3 acquisition offers she'd already received, all of which she'd turned down because she believed in building something bigger. She talked about the partnerships she was negotiating with major retailers. Marcus stood up. The meeting had lasted less than 3 minutes. He said his assistant would see her out and wished her luck with her venture. The way he said luck made it clear he thought she'd need it. Jordan gathered her materials, her hands shaking slightly. She'd been dismissed before. Every entrepreneur faced rejection, but something about this felt different. Marcus hadn't engaged with her pitch at all. He hadn't asked a single substantive question. He hadn't looked at her data. It was as if he'd made up his mind about her before she'd even opened her mouth. What Marcus didn't know was that Jordan wasn't just any entrepreneur. She was already in advanced negotiations with Titanium Capital, one of Apex's main competitors. Rachel Goldman, a partner at Titanium, had actually reviewed Jordan's materials thoroughly. Rachel had spent 2 hours on a video call with Jordan, diving deep into the technology, stress testing the business model, calling Jordan's existing clients to verify results. Rachel saw what Marcus hadn't bothered to look for. 3 weeks after the disastrous meeting with Marcus, Jordan signed a series of funding round with Titanium Capital for $8 million. Rachel negotiated a board seat and brought in 2 other strategic investors who had deep connections in the retail and manufacturing sectors. The announcement went out on TechCrunch and was picked up by several major business publications. Jordan Mitchell, a black woman entrepreneur from Oakland, had secured one of the largest series of rounds of the quarter for an AI logistics company. Marcus saw the announcement. He was having coffee with a fellow partner when someone showed him the article on their phone. He barely remembered the meeting. When his colleague asked if he'd passed on the deal, Marcus shrugged and said something about the pitch not being compelling. He moved on without giving it another thought. Jordan, meanwhile, was executing her vision with ruthless efficiency. With proper funding, she hired a team of 12 engineers and data scientists. She brought on a chief operating officer who'd previously scaled a logistics company from $10 million to $200 million in revenue. She expanded her beta program to 30 clients across 6 industries. The results were even better than her initial projections. Clients weren't just saving money, they were transforming their entire operations. Word spread quickly in the business community. 4 months after her funding round, Jordan's company landed a major partnership with a national retail chain. The retailer had been struggling with inventory management across their 800 stores. Jordan's platform solved problems their existing systems couldn't touch. The partnership was worth $12 million in annual recurring revenue. Suddenly, Jordan wasn't running a promising startup. She was running a real company with real scale. The media attention intensified. Business Insider ran a profile on Jordan titled, "How One Woman is Revolutionizing Supply Chain Tech." Forbes reached out about including her in their 30 under 30 list. She was invited to speak at major tech conferences. Rachel Goldman from Titanium Capital was actively promoting Jordan's success story, positioning both Jordan and Titanium as examples of what happened when investors actually paid attention to diverse founders. That's when the invitations started coming in for the National Tech Summit, the industry's biggest annual conference held in San Francisco. The summit brought together investors, entrepreneurs, tech executives, and media from around the world. Being selected as a keynote speaker was a major honor, typically reserved for established tech leaders. Jordan was chosen to deliver a talk on the future of AI in enterprise software. The conference organizers also announced a major partnership. Jordan's company would be featured as a showcase example of innovation, with their logo displayed prominently throughout the venue alongside sponsors and partners. Marcus Chen was planning to attend the summit. He went every year. Apex Ventures always had a presence there, hosting private dinners and meeting with potential portfolio companies. Marcus had no idea that the woman he dismissed in under 3 minutes would be front and center at the event he'd been attending for a decade. The morning of the National Tech Summit, Jordan woke up in her hotel room overlooking downtown San Francisco. She'd come a long way from that conference room in Palo Alto where Marcus had barely looked at her. Her company now had 42 employees, was generating $3 million in annual recurring revenue, and was on track to close a Series B funding round at a $70 million valuation. She'd been profiled in major publications and had been invited to join advisory boards for 2 major universities' entrepreneurship programs. She got dressed carefully that morning, not the same blazer she'd worn to pitch Marcus. She could afford better now. She looked at herself in the mirror and thought about all the meetings where she'd been underestimated, all the times investors had questioned whether she had the experience or the vision or the network to build something significant. She'd proved them all wrong. Marcus arrived at the summit around 9 in the morning. The conference was being held at the Moscone Center, a massive venue in downtown San Francisco. As he walked through the main entrance, he immediately noticed something odd. There were large banners hanging from the ceiling showcasing featured companies and keynote speakers. One banner caught his eye because he recognized the logo. It was a clean, modern design with interlocking circles that formed a supply chain pattern. He'd seen that logo before, but couldn't quite place it. Then he saw the name underneath, Jordan Mitchell, founder and CEO, Chain IQ. His stomach dropped. He stopped walking, staring up at the banner. Other conference attendees flowed around him. Someone bumped his shoulder. Marcus didn't notice. He was doing the math in his head, trying to remember. Chain IQ, that was the name of the company, the supply chain AI platform. The woman who'd come to his office, the meeting he'd ended after 3 minutes. He pulled out his phone and searched for Chain IQ. The results made his hands go cold. $8 million Series A led by Titanium Capital. Major partnership with a national retailer, Forbes 30 under 30, projected revenue of $15 million for the current year. Series B funding round in progress with multiple term sheets on the table. He clicked on a video interview Jordan had done with TechCrunch. She was articulate, confident, explaining her technology with clarity and passion. This was the same pitch he'd dismissed. Marcus felt sick. He was a professional investor. His entire career was built on identifying promising companies early. He'd missed this. Worse, he'd had the opportunity handed to him, and he'd thrown it away without even looking at it properly. And now Titanium Capital, run by Rachel Goldman, who'd been trying to steal deal flow from Apex for years, had the win. This wasn't just a missed opportunity. This was a public failure that made him look incompetent. He walked through the conference in a daze. Everywhere he looked, he saw Jordan's company. Chain IQ was featured in the Innovation Showcase. Their logo was on lanyards and conference bags. There was a booth where they were demoing their technology to a constant crowd of interested attendees and investors. Marcus avoided that area entirely. The keynote speeches were scheduled for 2 in the afternoon. Marcus considered skipping them, but he'd already committed to attending with 2 of his partners from Apex. They met for lunch at a restaurant near the conference center. His colleagues were talking about companies they'd met that morning, deals they were evaluating. Marcus wasn't paying attention. He was dreading the afternoon. When they returned to the Moscone Center, the main auditorium was filling up. Nearly 2,000 people would be attending the keynote session. Marcus found a seat toward the back. Maybe if he sat far enough away, he wouldn't have to fully confront what was happening. The conference organizer came on stage to introduce the speakers. There were 3 keynotes scheduled: a venture capitalist talking about AI trends, a tech CEO discussing the future of work, and Jordan Mitchell on enterprise innovation. When Jordan walked onto the stage, the applause was genuine and enthusiastic. She wore a sharp navy suit and carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd earned her place. Marcus watched her take the microphone, and something in his chest tightened. This was the same woman who'd sat across from him 6 months ago, trying to get him to look at her slides while he scrolled through his phone. Jordan's keynote was brilliant. She talked about how technology was democratizing access to enterprise-level tools. She discussed the challenges of building a company as a Black woman in tech, being transparent about the doors that had closed in her face, the investors who'd dismissed her without consideration. She didn't mention Marcus by name, but he felt like she was speaking directly to him. She talked about one particular meeting where an investor had given her less than 3 minutes before deciding her company wasn't worth his time. The audience was riveted. Jordan showed videos of her clients explaining how Chain IQ had transformed their businesses. She demonstrated the platform live on stage, showing how intuitive and powerful it was. She talked about her vision for the future, where every small business had access to the same technological advantages as Fortune 500 companies. When she finished, the applause lasted nearly a minute. People stood. Marcus remained seated, feeling like he'd been punched in the gut. After the keynotes ended, there was a networking reception. Marcus knew he should leave, go back to his hotel, maybe catch an early flight home, but something made him stay. Maybe it was professional curiosity. Maybe it was the need to confirm just how badly he'd messed up. He made his way through the crowded reception hall, accepting a glass of wine from a passing server. Then he saw her. Jordan was surrounded by a group of investors and entrepreneurs, everyone wanting to talk to her. Rachel Goldman from Titanium Capital was there too, standing slightly to the side with the satisfied smile of someone who'd made a winning bet. Marcus should have walked away. Instead, he found himself moving closer. He waited at the edge of the group. People cycled in and out, congratulating Jordan, asking about her company, requesting meetings. Finally, there was a brief moment when she was standing with just Rachel and one other person. Marcus stepped forward. Jordan saw him approaching, and her expression changed. Recognition, then something harder to read. Surprise maybe, or vindication. Marcus extended his hand. Jordan looked at it for a moment before shaking it. Her grip was firm. Marcus said her keynote was impressive. Jordan thanked him politely, her tone neutral. There was an awkward pause. Rachel Goldman was watching with undisguised interest. Marcus knew he should leave it at that, congratulate her and walk away, but something made him continue. Maybe it was ego. Maybe it was a desperate attempt to salvage something. He said he'd been thinking about their meeting, and he wanted to understand more about what she was building. Perhaps they could find a way to work together in the future. Jordan's laugh was quiet but cutting. She asked if he was serious. Marcus insisted he was. He said that Apex Ventures could still add value, even though she'd already secured funding. They had connections, experience, a track record. Maybe they could participate in her Series B round. That's when Jordan's demeanor changed completely. The polite professionalism dropped away, replaced by something sharp and direct. She told Marcus she remembered their meeting very clearly. She remembered how he'd scrolled through his phone while she was presenting, how he dismissed her without asking a single substantive question, how he'd made her feel like she was wasting his time. She said she'd spent 18 months building her company before that meeting, had incredible data and traction, and he couldn't be bothered to give her 5 minutes of genuine attention. Marcus tried to interject, to explain, but Jordan wasn't finished. She said the problem wasn't just that he'd passed on her company. Investors passed on good companies all the time. The problem was that he'd never really looked at her company at all. He'd made a snap judgment based on something that had nothing to do with her technology, her team, her results, or her vision. She asked him directly, how many other founders had he dismissed the same way? How many other opportunities had he missed because he couldn't see past his own biases. Rachel Goldman was watching this exchange with barely concealed satisfaction. Other people nearby had stopped their conversations and were listening. Marcus felt the heat rising in his face. He said he understood her frustration, but business was about looking forward. He could admit he'd made a mistake in their first meeting, but that didn't mean they couldn't have a productive relationship now. Jordan shook her head. She said this wasn't about holding a grudge. It was about recognizing patterns. She told Marcus that after Titanium Capital funded her, she'd started talking to other diverse founders who'd pitched to Apex Ventures. The stories were remarkably similar: short meetings, dismissive attitudes, quick rejections without substantive engagement. She'd done her research. In the past 5 years, Apex had funded 63 companies. Only 3 had female founders. Only 1 had a black founder, and that company had a white male co-founder who'd done most of the pitching. Marcus felt the anger rising in his chest. He said it was unfair to accuse him of discrimination. He'd built his reputation on identifying talent. He'd made his decisions based on business fundamentals, not demographics. Jordan asked him to explain, then, what business fundamentals had led him to dismiss her company in under 3 minutes without reviewing her data or asking about her traction. Marcus didn't have a good answer. He said something about gut instinct, about pattern recognition developed over years in the industry. Jordan's response was devastating in its simplicity. She said maybe his pattern recognition was broken. Maybe the patterns he thought he was seeing weren't about business potential at all. Rachel Goldman chose that moment to interject. She put her hand on Jordan's shoulder and said they had another meeting to get to. But before she left, Rachel looked directly at Marcus and thanked him. She said that by passing on Jordan's company, he'd given Titanium Capital one of their best investments in years. She said she was grateful he hadn't recognized what he was looking at, because now Titanium would reap all the rewards. Then she and Jordan walked away, leaving Marcus standing alone in the middle of the reception. The rest of the conference was torture for Marcus. Everywhere he went, people were talking about Jordan's keynote. Investors were discussing chain IQ impressive growth. Someone mentioned that Jordan was in talks with 3 major investment firms about her Series B round, and the valuation was rumored to be even higher than expected. Marcus left the conference early, claiming a scheduling conflict. On the flight back to Palo Alto, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about the conversation. He pulled out his laptop and started going through Apex's portfolio. He looked at the companies they'd funded in the past 5 years. He looked at the ones they'd passed on. He started noticing patterns he'd never seen before. The companies with diverse founders consistently had to provide more data, more proof of concept, more evidence of traction before getting funded. The companies with male founders who fit the traditional Silicon Valley mold got seed funding based on vision and potential. He thought about Jordan's question. How many other opportunities had he missed? He started researching some of the companies Apex had passed on in recent years. One was now valued at over $200 million. Another had been acquired by a major tech company. A third was preparing for an IPO. In each case, the founder was a woman or a person of color. In each case, Marcus or his partners had found reasons to pass. The realization was uncomfortable. Marcus had always thought of himself as a meritocrat. He believed he funded the best ideas regardless of who presented them, but the data told a different story. His pattern recognition, the instinct he was so proud of, might have been reinforcing biases he didn't even know he had. When Marcus got back to the office, he called a partner meeting. He showed his colleagues the data he'd compiled. He talked about the Jordan Mitchell situation, not hiding his own failure. He proposed that Apex needed to make serious changes to how they evaluated founders and companies. He suggested bringing in consultants to audit their processes. He recommended actively recruiting diverse entrepreneurs into their pipeline. He proposed blind initial reviews where pitch materials were evaluated without knowing the founder's name or background. Some of his partners were receptive. Others were defensive, saying they'd always been fair in their evaluations. But Marcus pushed. He said the numbers didn't lie. Apex was missing opportunities, leaving money on the table, and damaging their reputation in the process. The industry was changing. Investors who couldn't adapt would be left behind. The changes at Apex didn't happen overnight, but they did happen. Within a year, the firm had implemented new processes for evaluating founders. They'd hired 2 new partners, both women with strong track records. They'd funded 5 companies led by diverse founders, all showing promising early results. Marcus personally reached out to some of the founders they'd previously dismissed, not to invest, but to apologize and to ask what they could do better. Jordan Mitchell, meanwhile, closed her Series B round at an $85 million valuation. Chain IQ expanded internationally, opening offices in London and Singapore. The company grew to over 200 employees and was being discussed as a potential IPO candidate within 2 years. Jordan became a sought-after speaker and advisor, known for her willingness to discuss the challenges diverse founders faced in getting funded. She never accepted another meeting with Marcus Chen. When he reached out through email to apologize formally and to ask if they could have a conversation about what he'd learned, she politely declined. She said she appreciated that he was trying to make changes, but she'd moved on. She suggested he focus his energy on the next generation of founders who would pitch to him, making sure they got the fair hearing she hadn't received. Marcus kept that email. He printed it out and put it on his desk as a reminder. Every time he took a pitch meeting, he thought about Jordan standing in his conference room, trying to show him slides while he scrolled through his phone. He thought about the banner at the tech summit with her company's logo, the company he could have funded if he'd just paid attention. He thought about the look on her face at the reception when he'd suggested they work together, the mix of disbelief and disappointment that he still didn't understand what he'd done wrong. The story spread through Silicon Valley. Other investors heard about what happened and started examining their own practices. Some made changes. Others insisted they were different. Their decisions were purely merit-based. But the conversation had shifted. Diverse founders started speaking up more openly about their experiences. Data started emerging about funding disparities. The industry was being forced to confront uncomfortable truths. Jordan never mentioned Marcus by name in her public talks about her funding journey. She didn't have to. The people who needed to know the story already did, and the lesson was clear. Talent comes in many forms, and investors who can't see beyond their own assumptions and biases will always leave opportunity on the table. 5 years later, Chain IQ went public in one of the most successful tech IPO of the year. The company was valued at $2 billion. Jordan rang the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange, standing with her team and with Rachel Goldman from Titanium Capital, who'd believed in her from the start. Marcus Chen watched the live stream from his office in Palo Alto. Apex Ventures had changed significantly in those 5 years, and Marcus believed they were better for it. But he would never forget what that change had cost him personally. The investment he dismissed in 3 minutes without really looking at it would have returned over 100 times his initial investment if he'd participated in that series around. But the real cost wasn't the money. It was the reminder that in the investment business, as in life, what you don't see can hurt you far more than what you do. And sometimes, the biggest opportunities are the ones staring you right in the face, waiting for you to actually pay attention. This story of Jordan Mitchell and Marcus Chen reminds us that opportunities are everywhere, but only visible to those willing to truly look. If you found this story powerful, make sure to share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling me what you think about how this situation unfolded. And if you have your own story about being underestimated or overlooking someone's potential, I want to hear about it. Don't forget to let me know what city you're watching from. Thanks for being here, and remember, the next time someone pitches you an idea, give them the attention they deserve. You never know what you might be missing.